In the shadowed alleys of Beirut, where the scent of fresh-baked sweets mingles with the echo of distant rockets, a simple cake became the deadliest weapon in Mossad's arsenal. Delivered by women who walked the line between life and death, it carried not just icing and layers, but poison that would silence a Hezbollah commander forever, proving that in the world of espionage, the sweetest deception can be the most lethal. Beirut, July 12, 2006. The summer heat clings to the air like a shroud as Nadia Khalil, a young Lebanese baker in her late 20s, kneels beside her daughter's hospital bed in the dim glow of St. George Hospital. Little Amina, just 8 years old, lies pale and fragile, her small chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Tubes snake across her arms, delivering the life-sustaining fluids that battle her rare blood disorder, a cruel inheritance that has turned Nadia's world into a relentless cycle of hope and despair. Nadia strokes Amina's hair, whispering promises she fears she can't keep. "You'll taste my honey cakes again soon, Habibti," she murmurs, her voice cracking. Outside, the city trembles under the opening salvos of what will become the Second Lebanon War. Israeli jets streak overhead, and Hezbollah rockets arc southward in retaliation. Nadia, a widow since her husband was killed in a cross-border skirmish 2 years prior, feels the war's grip tightening. But her fight is personal. Amina's condition demands a bone marrow transplant unavailable in war-torn Lebanon, and the costs are astronomical. In that moment, as explosions rumble in the distance, Nadia vows silently to do anything, to save her child. Nadia's story unfolds against the brutal backdrop of the 2006 Lebanon War, a 34-day conflict that pitted Israel against Hezbollah, the militant Shia group backed by Iran and Syria. Sparked by Hezbollah's cross-border raid that captured 2 Israeli soldiers, Ehud Goldwasser and Eldad Regev, the war saw over 4,000 rockets rain down on northern Israel, killing 44 civilians and displacing hundreds of thousands. In response, Israeli forces launched a massive air and ground campaign, devastating southern Lebanon and Beirut suburbs, claiming over 1,200 Lebanese lives, many civilians. The global stage was tense. The United States under President George W. Bush supported Israel as a bulwark against terrorism, while Iran funneled weapons and funds to Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, who broadcast defiant speeches from hidden bunkers. Europe and the UN scrambled for ceasefires, but the human toll mounted. Families shattered, cities scarred. For Israel, the war exposed vulnerabilities in its defenses, fueling Mossad's resolve to dismantle Hezbollah's command structure from within. Nadia, caught in this maelstrom, represented the war's unseen victims, ordinary people whose lives became pawns in a larger geopolitical chess game. As the bombs fell, Nadia returned to her modest bakery in the Dahi suburb, a Hezbollah stronghold pockmarked by craters. The shop, inherited from her father, was a haven of warmth amid the chaos. Shelves lined with pistachio malmo cookies, almond baklava, and her signature rosewater cakes, layered with cream and drizzled in honey. Customers, including local militants seeking comfort in sweets, kept her afloat. But the war's end on August 14th, 2006, brought no relief. Reconstruction was slow, and Amina's health deteriorated. Doctors gave her months without treatment. Desperate, Nadia sold family heirlooms and borrowed from relatives, but it wasn't enough. Then, one rainy evening in September 2006, an elegant woman in her 40s entered the bakery. She introduced herself as Dr. Elena Roth, a representative from a Swiss medical foundation aiding war victims. With a compassionate smile and flawless Arabic, she offered hope, full funding for Amina's transplant in Geneva, including travel and recovery. Nadia, tears streaming, grasped at the lifeline, but there was a catch, whispered in the back room amid sacks of flour. Nadia must help them in return. Unbeknownst to Nadia, Dr. Roth was Miriam Levy, a seasoned Mossad operative, one of the agency's elite female Katzes, case officers, who specialize in human recruitment. Born in Tel Aviv in 1965 to Holocaust survivors, Miriam had joined Mossad in her 20s, driven by the 1973 Yom Kippur War's losses that claimed her brother. Her training at the Midrasha Academy honed her in psychological manipulation, disguise, and extraction. Now in Beirut, she embodied Mossad's shift toward precision operations post-2006, where women like her, less suspected in patriarchal societies, excelled in infiltration. The target, Colonel Hassan al-Rashid, Hezbollah's logistics chief, responsible for smuggling Iranian FAR 5 rockets through Syria. Al-Rashid, a devout family man in his 50s, had a weakness: a weekly indulgence in Nadia's rosewater cakes, delivered to his fortified home on the outskirts of Beirut. Mossad's intelligence, gathered via signals intercepts from Unit 8200 and drone surveillance, pinpointed this routine. The plan, codenamed Sweet Veil, aimed to poison him gradually, mimicking a natural ailment to avoid retaliation. Miriam's approach was masterful. Over tea in the bakery, she wove a tale of humanitarian aid, backed by forged documents and a staged phone call from a Swiss doctor. Nadia hesitated, her hands trembling on the dough roller. "What if they find out?" she asked, thinking of Hezbollah's infamous security apparatus, which had executed suspected collaborators during the war. Miriam leaned in, her eyes steady. "We protect our own. Your daughter lives, or she doesn't. The choice is yours." The emotional stakes pierced Nadia like a knife. Amina's innocent face flashed in her mind, the child's drawings of cakes and flowers now yellowing on the fridge. By October 2006, Nadia agreed, her decision born of maternal desperation rather than ideology. Mossad provided the poison, a custom alkaloid compound, odorless and tasteless, developed in a Haifa lab by chemists who had refined it from earlier operations like the 1978 poisoning of PFLP leader Wadi Haddad with tainted chocolate. The first delivery came on November 2, 2006. Nadia baked the cake with shaking hands, incorporating the vial's contents into batter, a mere drop per layer, designed to accumulate over weeks, attacking the liver and inducing failure. As her assistant, a young woman unaware of the plot, boxed it. Nadia whispered a prayer. The driver, Al-Rashid's trusted aide, arrived promptly, paying in cash with a nod. Back in Tel Aviv, Miriam monitored via a hidden camera in Nadia's shop, her team analyzing Al-Rashid's intercepted calls for signs of illness. The tension built. One missed dose could unravel everything. Nadia lay awake nights, haunted by guilt, imagining Al-Rashid's family, his wife and 3 children, enjoying the cake unaware. Yet Amina's improving tests in Geneva, where she arrived on November 15 for prep, steeled her resolve. By December 2006, Al-Rashid complained of fatigue in encrypted messages, attributing it to post-war stress. Hezbollah's doctors dismissed it as overwork, but Mossad knew better. Miriam, posing as a European aid worker, visited Nadia under cover of night, slipping more vials through a loose brick in the bakery wall. Their meetings were fraught. Once, a Hezbollah patrol passed as they spoke, forcing them to freeze in shadows. Nadia's life became a tightrope, smiling at customers by day, poisoning by night. The human cost weighed heavily. Her once joyful bakery now felt like a tomb, each oven bell a reminder of betrayal. Globally, the war's aftermath simmered. UN Resolution 1701 deployed peacekeepers, but Hezbollah rearmed, smuggling weapons via Damascus. Israel, under Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, faced inquiries into the war's failures, amplifying Mossad's urgency to strike surgically. As winter deepened, the operation intensified. On January 18, 2007, Al-Rashid missed a key meeting, his aides noting jaundice. Nadia, now complicit in death, baked with mechanical precision, her dreams filled with crumbling cakes and bloodied hands. Miriam, from a safe house in Cyprus, coordinated with her superior, a grizzled veteran named Avi, who pushed for acceleration. One more month, he urged over secure lines. But doubts crept in. What if Al-Rashid suspected? What if Nadia cracked? The emotional undercurrent was palpable. 2 women, Miriam and Nadia, bound by necessity, one a warrior for her nation, the other a mother for her child. Their alliance, fragile as spun sugar, held the fate of nations in balance. The winter of 2007 settled over Beirut like a cold promise. The city's scars from the previous summer's war still raw under fresh snow flurries that rarely fell this far south. Nadia Khalil moved through her bakery with the mechanical rhythm of someone who had learned to compartmentalize terror. By day, she smiled at the regulars, Old women buying sfow for tea, young men in Hezbollah scarves ordering trays for meetings, while her hands, steady now from repetition, measure flour and sugar with the precision of a surgeon. By night, alone in the back room after the ovens cooled, she opened the hidden compartment behind the flour sacks and checked the small glass vials Miriam had left. Each one contained the next dose of the alkaloid, colorless as water, lethal in accumulation. On February 3rd, 2007, Nadia received the signal she had dreaded. A single red rose delivered with the morning milk delivery, its stem wrapped in black ribbon. Miriam's code for acceleration. Al-Rashid's condition was worsening faster than anticipated. Jaundice deepening. Weight loss noticeable even in Hezbollah's tightly controlled medical reports intercepted by Unit 8200. The Mossad analyst in Tel Aviv had modeled the toxin progression. Another 4 to 6 weeks of consistent dosing would push him into irreversible hepatic failure, mimicking cirrhosis from years of stress and poor diet. No autopsy would raise alarms in a country where war wounds and disease were commonplace. Nadia baked that morning's cake with ritualistic care, the rosewater essence she loved, the same she had used to soothe Amina during fever nights, now masked the poison's faint metallic trace. She layered the sponge meticulously, spreading the cream infused with the day's vial between each slice, then sealed the top with a lattice of honey glaze. As she boxed it, her fingers brushed a photograph of Amina taped inside the lid. The girl, now in Geneva recovering from her transplant, smiling in a hospital gown, holding a stuffed bear Mossad had arranged as a gift. Nadia kissed the photo before closing the box. "For you, Habibdi," she whispered. The driver arrived at 11:47 a.m. Same as always, paid in crisp Lebanese pounds, and left without a word. Nadia watched the van disappear down the cratered street toward Al-Rashid's villa in Heretreich, her stomach twisting into knots she could no longer untie. In Cyprus, Miriam Levy paced a safe house balcony overlooking Limassol harbor. The wind carried salt and diesel. Below, fishing boats bobbed beside yachts that belonged to no fishermen. She reviewed the latest intercepts on her encrypted laptop. Al-Rashid had canceled 2 meetings, citing health concerns. His wife had taken him to a private clinic in Beirut's Christian Quarter, where doctors prescribed rest and vitamins. Miriam allowed herself a thin smile. The deception was holding, but she knew the margin for error was shrinking. Hezbollah's internal security, Unit 910, their counterintelligence arm, had begun routine polygraph tests on support staff after a separate Mossad cell was rolled up in Damascus the previous autumn. Nadia was still clean, but proximity bred suspicion. Miriam's own cover as an aid worker was wearing thin. She had been seen too often near the bakery. Extraction plans were already drafted. A fishing boat to Cyprus if the net closed. Back in Beirut, Nadia's nights grew shorter. She barely slept, jolted awake by imagined knocks at the door. Hezbollah checkpoints had multiplied since the war, and every time a black SUV slowed near the shop, her pulse hammered. She began to notice small changes in her customers. A man who lingered too long over coffee, eyes flicking to the back room. Another who asked casually if she had new recipes for special orders. Paranoia or reality? She couldn't tell anymore. One evening in late February, as she cleaned the counters, her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered, hard in her throat, a woman's voice soft accented. "Amina sends her love. She drew you a new picture today." It was Miriam's handler in Geneva, confirming the girl's progress and reminding Nadia of the stakes. The call lasted 17 seconds. Nadia hung up and vomited into the sink. By March 2007, Al-Rashid's decline accelerated. Intercepts showed frantic calls to Iranian doctors in Tehran, requests for specialists. Hezbollah leadership grew restless. Al-Rashid oversaw critical supply lines from Syria, Grad rockets, anti-tank Cornet missiles, night vision gear, all part of Iran's effort to rebuild Hezbollah's arsenal post-2006. His absence created gaps that Israel's military intelligence noted with grim satisfaction. In Tel Aviv, the head of Caesarea, the Mossad division responsible for special operations, pushed Miriam for confirmation. "We need visual proof of incapacitation," he ordered during a secure video link. Miriam arranged it through a local asset. a Hezbollah driver who owed money to a loan shark Mossad quietly controlled. On March 15th, the driver smuggled a tiny camera into al-Rashid's villa during a delivery. The grainy footage arrived in Cyprus 2 days later. Al-Rashid, once robust, now gaunt and yellow-eyed, propped on pillows while his wife spoon-fed him broth. He barely spoke. The cake sat untouched on the bedside table. Miriam forwarded the clip to headquarters with a single line, "Target terminal. Timeline 10 to 14 days." The response came swiftly. "Prepare for endgame." No celebration, no congratulations, just cold operational language. Miriam felt the familiar hollow in her chest. She had recruited dozens over the years, but Nadia's case haunted her. The woman was not an ideologue. She was a mother cornered. Miriam remembered her own mother, widowed young, raising 3 children in a cramped apartment after the 1973 war. Empathy was dangerous in this work, yet it lingered. On March 22nd, Nadia delivered what she sensed would be the final cake. She had doubled the dose that morning, hands steady despite the tremor in her soul. As the driver left, she locked the bakery door early, sank to the floor among sacks of semolina, and wept for al-Rashid's unsuspecting family, for the man she had poisoned without ever meeting, for herself. She thought of confession, of running to Hezbollah and begging mercy. But the image of Amina stopped her. Mercy was not Hezbollah's currency. That same night, in southern Lebanon near the Litani River, Israeli drones circled silently above a Hezbollah training camp. The images they fed back showed fighters drilling with newly arrived Iranian missiles, proof that al-Rashid's supply chain still functioned, but faltered without him. Mossad's war room in Gilead lit up with analysts plotting contingencies. If al-Rashid died quietly, the chain might collapse under internal pressure. If suspicion arose, retaliation could follow. The human calculus was brutal. One man's death to prevent hundreds, perhaps thousands, in future rocket barrages. Nadia did not know that on March 28, 2007, Colonel Hassan al-Rashid slipped into a coma. His wife found him unresponsive beside an empty cake plate. Doctors at the American University Hospital pronounced hepatic encephalopathy secondary to acute liver failure. No poison was suspected. The man had lived hard, they said. Too much stress, too little rest. Hezbollah issued a brief statement praising his service and appointed a deputy. The funeral was subdued, held under tight security in Dahi. Nadia watched from the edge of the crowd, veiled and silent, as the coffin passed. She felt nothing at first, only a vast, echoing emptiness. 2 days later, on March 30th, a courier delivered an envelope to the bakery. Inside, a single plane ticket to Geneva one way, departing April 5th, a note in Miriam's handwriting. "You've done enough. Go to her." Nadia closed the shop for the last time that evening, packed a small suitcase with Amina's drawings and her wedding ring, and left the keys on the counter. As she walked to the taxi stand under a rare spring rain, she did not look back. In Cyprus, Miriam watched the live feed of Nadia boarding the flight from Beirut airport. Her own extraction was scheduled for the next week. She lit a cigarette on the balcony, exhaled into the night, and allowed herself one quiet thought. Sometimes the sweetest victories tasted like ash. April 5th, 2007. The roar of the Airbus A320 engines fades as Nadia Khalil steps onto the tarmac at Geneva International Airport, the crisp Swiss air hitting her like a slap after Beirut's heavy humidity. She clutches a small carry-on, everything she owns now, and scans arrival's hall with the wary eyes of someone who has spent months expecting danger around every corner. Amina waits beyond the glass doors, held by a Swiss social worker from the foundation. The girl looks taller, healthier, her cheeks flush with color instead of pallor. When their eyes meet, Amina breaks free and runs, throwing herself into Nadia's arms with a force that nearly knocks her mother backward. "Mama, you came." The child's voice is bright, unburdened. Nadia buries her face in Amina's hair, inhaling the clean scent of hospital shampoo and new life. For the first time in 7 months, she allows herself to cry, not the silent, choking sobs of guilt, but something deeper, raw, almost like release. In the weeks that follow, Nadia settles into a small furnished apartment on the outskirts of Geneva, provided by the foundation. Mossad's cover holds. Monthly stipends arrive as humanitarian aid payments. Medical follow-ups are scheduled, and a caseworker checks in weekly. Nadia finds work in a patisserie near Lake Geneva, rolling dough and piping cream under fluorescent lights that feel sterile compared to her old bakery's warmth. She avoids newspapers, avoids television, especially the Arabic channels that still carry Hezbollah tributes to fallen commanders. She tells herself al-Rashid's death was necessary, inevitable, a single life traded for her daughters. But at night, when the apartment is quiet except for Amina's soft breathing in the next room, the doubt creeps in like fog off the lake. She dreams of cakes crumbling into ash, of a man's yellowed eyes staring at her from the shadows. Across the Mediterranean, in the windowless operations room beneath Glilla Junction, the mood is subdued triumph. On April 10, 2007, Mossad's director Meir Dagan receives a final confirmation from a human source inside Hezbollah's medical network. Colonel Hassan al-Rashid's death certificate lists multi-organ failure due to idiopathic liver cirrhosis. No toxicology screen was ordered, no external investigation launched. The file is closed quietly. Dagan, a man whose face carries the lines of decades in the shadows, nods once to his deputy. Sweet veil complete. No blowback. The operation had cost less than $300,000, mostly recruitment, poison development, and extraction logistics, and delivered a surgical strike against Hezbollah's logistics backbone. Iranian shipments slowed in the following months. Several convoys were interdicted by Israeli airstrikes based on updated intelligence that flowed more freely once al-Rashid's replacements scrambled to fill the void. But victory, in Mossad's world, is never clean. Unit 910, Hezbollah's counterintelligence, launched an internal review in May 2007. They traced the cake deliveries backward, interviewed the driver, who knew nothing, questioned bakery suppliers, and eventually circled back to Nadia's now-abandoned shop. The place had been looted during her absence. Windows smashed, ovens cold. But a single red rose petal remained pressed between floorboards, overlooked by the scavengers. A Hezbollah security officer photographed it, filed it as possible symbolic communication, and added Nadia's name to a growing list of persons of interest. She was labeled a potential collaborator. Her photo circulated among operatives in Europe and the Levant. The net was not yet closing, but had begun to tighten. Miriam Levy returned to Israel on April 12th, landing at Ben Gurion under a new identity. She spent 2 weeks in debrief at a discreet facility near Herzliya, recounting every meeting, every coded signal, every moment of doubt with Nadia. Her handlers praised the operation's elegance. No explosives, no gunfire, no fingerprints. A woman's weapon, a cake, had done what airstrikes could not without risking escalation. Yet Miriam felt the weight differently. During one late-night session, she asked quietly, "What happens to Nadia now?" The answer was clinical. She's deniable. If Hezbollah moves against her, we have no obligation. Miriam said nothing, but the words lodged in her throat like broken glass. By summer 2007, Nadia began to rebuild. Amina started school, learned French, made friends who had never heard a rocket siren. Nadia even started dating. A kind Swiss-Lebanese engineer who brought her flowers instead of roses wrapped in black. She told him little of her past, only that she had lost her husband in the war and fled for her daughter's health. The lie felt necessary, protective, but the past refused to stay buried. On July 19, 2007, the first anniversary of the war's outbreak, Nadia received an anonymous envelope at the patisserie. Inside, a single photograph of her old bakery, the front door padlocked, and on the back, in Arabic, "We remember the cakes. We remember the baker." No signature, no threat explicit enough for police, but the message was unmistakable. Nadia burned the photo in the kitchen sink that night, watching the edges curl into black. Miriam, meanwhile, was reassigned to Europe, tasked with monitoring Hezbollah's fundraising networks in Germany and Belgium. She kept tabs on Nadia through occasional discreet checks, bank transactions, school records, nothing invasive. She told herself it was professional caution, but part of her needed to know the woman she had pulled into the abyss was still breathing. In October 2007, a report crossed her desk. Hezbollah had quietly eliminated 2 suspected low-level informants in Beirut, both connected to al-Rashid's supply chain. The message was clear. Traitors would not be forgotten. Miriam stared at the names for a long time, wondering if Nadia's name had surfaced in those interrogations. The global context continued to shift. In September 2007, Israel bombed a suspected Syrian nuclear reactor at Al-Kabar, an operation Mossad supported with intelligence gathered in part from Hezbollah's disrupted networks. The strike succeeded without immediate retaliation, a testament to the quiet erosion of Hezbollah's capabilities. But Nasrallah's speeches grew fiercer, promising revenge for every fallen commander. Nadia listened to one such broadcast on a car radio while driving Amina home from ballet class. His voice filled the vehicle, vowing that the blood of our martyrs will not dry. Nadia turned it off quickly, her hands shaking on the wheel. By early 2008, the strain began to show. Nadia suffered panic attacks, sudden, suffocating waves that left her gasping in supermarket aisles. She sought therapy under an assumed name, telling the counselor only fragments. Survivor's guilt, fear of retribution, the weight of a secret too heavy to share. The therapist suggested journaling. Nadia tried, but every entry circled back to the same image, a cake box leaving her hands, traveling across the city, ending a life. She tore the pages out and burned them too. In March 2008, Miriam received a priority flash from Tel Aviv. Hezbollah had activated a sleeper cell in Europe, possibly tasked with locating the baker. The cell was small, amateurish, but determined. Mossad's countermeasures were swift: surveillance, disinformation, quiet arrests in Brussels. But the threat lingered. Miriam requested permission to warn Nadia directly. Denied. "She's burned," came the reply. "Contact risks exposure." Miriam disobeyed, just once. She mailed an unsigned postcard from Zurich. A generic Swiss landscape on the front. 3 words on the back in block letters. Stay low. Travel. It arrived at Nadia's apartment on April 3rd, 2008. Nadia read it, then flushed it down the toilet. That spring, Nadia made her decision. She applied for political asylum in Switzerland, citing credible fear of persecution due to her perceived association with foreign intelligence. The application was thin on details, heavy on emotion. War widow, mother protecting a sick child, targeted by militants. Mossad quietly supported it through back channels, providing just enough corroboration to tip the scales without revealing sources. In July 2008, asylum was granted. Nadia changed her last name to Moreau, enrolled Amina in a new school, and began, slowly, to breathe again. But across the sea, in the dim light of a Beirut safe house, a Hezbollah investigator pinned Nadia's photograph to a corkboard beside al-Rashid's death certificate. A red thread connected them. The hunt, though slowed, had not ended. The autumn of 2008 arrived in Geneva with a chill that seeped through the windows of Nadia Moreau's apartment on Rue de Vives. She had begun to feel the tentative rhythm of safety. Mornings dropping Amina at school, afternoons kneading dough at the patisserie, evenings cooking simple Lebanese dishes that reminded her home without the weight of memory. The anonymous threats had stopped after the asylum grant. No more postcards, no more petals. She told herself the trail had gone cold, that Hezbollah had larger enemies to chase, perhaps the growing shadow of the Syrian civil war or the endless chess game with Israel. She even started to believe it. But on October 14th, 2008, the illusion shattered. Amina came home from school clutching a small envelope she had found taped inside her backpack. No stamp, no address, just her name in neat Arabic script. Nadia's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, her old bakery in Dahi, taken recently. The padlock still on the door, but fresh graffiti sprayed across the shutter. "The baker remembers." On the reverse, handwritten, "Your daughter is beautiful. It would be a shame if she forgot her mother's recipes." Nadia sank to the kitchen floor, the photo trembling between her fingers. For the first time since Beirut, she felt truly hunted. She did not call the Swiss police. She knew better. Any official report would draw attention, and Hezbollah's reach in Europe was long and patient. Instead, she burned the photo in the bathroom sink, watched the flames consume the image until nothing remained but ash. That night, she sat by Amina's bed until the girl fell asleep, then packed 2 small suitcases, clothes, documents, the few photographs she had kept. At dawn, she left a note for her employer, withdrew what little savings remained, and bought train tickets to Zurich. From there, she planned to disappear again, perhaps to Canada, where a distant cousin lived quietly. She told Amina they were going on an adventure. The child believed her. In Tel Aviv, Miriam Levy received the alert on October 16th. A flag transaction on one of Nadia's old accounts. Small withdrawal, then silence, triggered Mossad's passive monitoring net. A quick check of Geneva police logs showed no incident report, but an asset in the Lebanese diaspora community reported whispers. Hezbollah's European cell had reactivated, this time with a single target. Miriam requested reactivation of her operational status. Dagon's office approved it quietly. No fanfare, no paperwork trail. Clean it up, the directive read. No footprints. Miriam arrived in Geneva on October 19th, under a Dutch passport, hair dyed auburn, glasses she didn't need. She rented a nondescript apartment 2 streets from Nadia's and began surveillance. The patisserie, the school route, the apartment building. On the 3rd day, she saw the signs. 2 men in dark coats lingering near the school gate, one holding a phone as if taking casual photos. They were clumsy, overconfident, the kind of operatives sent when the real professionals were tied up elsewhere. Miriam photographed them from across the street, ran the images through facial recognition. Both matched low-level Hezbollah logistics men, known to frequent Brussels and Paris. She knew their orders: locate, confirm, eliminate, quietly if possible, publicly if necessary. Miriam moved fast. She contacted a former asset, a retired Swiss police detective who owed Mossad a favor from a 2005 arms smuggling bust. Together they arranged a discreet extraction. On October 23rd, while Amina was at school, Miriam knocked on Nadia's door. When it opened, Nadia froze, recognition flashing across her face like lightning. "You," she breathed. Miriam stepped inside without invitation. "Close the door. They found you. They're here. We leave tonight." The conversation that followed was raw, stripped of pretense. Nadia accused Miriam of ruining her life, of turning her into a killer for a cause that wasn't hers. Miriam listened without interruption. When Nadia finished, tears streaming, Miriam spoke quietly. "I never promised you peace. I promised your daughter would live. She still can if you come with me now." Nadia looked at the wall where Amina's drawings hung, bright crayons depicting lakes and mountains, a world without war. She nodded once. That evening, under cover of a sudden rainstorm, Miriam drove them to a private airstrip near Lausanne. A small charter plane waited, engines idling. No customs, no questions. Mossad's logistics had greased the wheels. Nadia carried Amina aboard, the girl sleepy and confused. As the plane lifted into the night, Nadia looked down at the lights of Geneva shrinking below. She felt no relief, only a vast, quiet exhaustion. They landed in Toronto at dawn on October 24th, 2008. Canadian intelligence, quietly briefed by Mossad counterparts, facilitated entry under new identities. Nadia Moreau became Nadia Khalil again, but with forged papers listing her as a refugee from France. A safe house in Mississauga waited, modest, anonymous. Miriam stayed only long enough to ensure they were settled. Before leaving, she placed an envelope on the kitchen table. Cash, a burner phone with one number programmed, and a single line written on a card. "If they find you again, call. We finish what we start." Nadia never called. She found work in a Lebanese bakery in Toronto's East End, teaching Amina to make svalfin mamalt the way her grandmother once did. The girl grew up Canadian, spoke English with a faint French accent, and asked few questions about the past. Nadia told her only that they had left Switzerland for a better life. The truth remained locked inside her, a secret shared with no one. Hezbollah's European cell never found them again. The 2 operatives in Geneva were quietly removed in early 2009. Car accidents, one in the Alps, one in a Paris suburb. Mossad left no signature, but the message was received. The file on the baker was archived, marked inactive. No victory parade, no medals, just another operation closed. In 2015, during the height of the Syrian war, Hassan Nasrallah mentioned in a speech the traitors who poison our brothers with sweetness. He named no names, but Nadia, watching from her Toronto living room, felt the old chill. She turned off the television and went to check on Amina, now a teenager with dreams of becoming a doctor. The girl slept peacefully. Nadia stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. Years later, in 2023, a journalist researching Mossad's post-2006 operations came close to Nadia's story. Anonymous sources spoke of a cake, a mother, a child saved. The piece was never published. Too many gaps, too much risk. But in a quiet cafe in Tel Aviv, Miriam Levy, now retired, gray at the temples, read the draft leaked to her by an old colleague. She smiled faintly, folded the pages, and burned them in her fireplace. Some stories, she thought, are best left tasting of sugar and silence. The cake had done its work. The poison had faded. And somewhere across oceans, a mother and daughter lived, ordinary, unmarked, alive.